Hi, I'm Tony Anscombe. Welcome to this webinar on identity theft. I'm a chief security evangelist for cybersecurity company ESET, who make anti-malware products to keep us safe on our devices. If you've got questions about identity theft, about this presentation, or you've got some issue, feel free to reach out to me. Here's my email address and here's my Twitter handle as well. If you don't want to ask the question at the end of the presentation because it's of personal nature or you just don't like sharing questions in public, feel free to drop me an email. So what is identity theft? Well, it's when somebody uses your personal information, such as your social security number or other details about you, to commit fraud or a criminal act. And let's be really clear, they do this for monetary gain typically. Because it's a business and it can have some rich rewards, which we're going to get back to as we go through this presentation. Now, how prevalent is the issue? Well, a Harris poll estimated 60 million Americans have been affected by identity theft. So that's roughly 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 of us. And it's not just the adult population that gets identity theft issues either. An identity thief can steal the identity of a child, because if they've got a social security number, then actually they can go and commit the same monetary gain type fraud against the child. What we don't want to do is get our kids to a point where they apply for a driver's license only to find they've already been banned. Now, how do they gather information? Well, the obvious one here is a stolen wallet or purse. The information we carry around in our pockets, in our wallets. You've got credit cards and driver's licenses, you've got your address, and obviously there's monetary gain if you've got some dollar bills in there as well. But that's the more traditional way of somebody stealing your identity. That's why you should never have PIN numbers and things written down, and certainly not stored in your wallet. Stealing or redirecting mail. Here you've got the mail. A lot of people have got the mailboxes with the flip down front, and the mail goes in and you collect the mail, and there's no real security around the mail. So there's actually this physical stealing of mail. There's also the redirection of mail. So if an identity thief wants to actually intercept your mail, potentially they may actually go onto USPS and ask them to redirect the mail to another address or a PO box somewhere. Now, the picture here, the legs sticking out the trash, the garbage can there, very funny, but it's real, unfortunately. Dumpster diving. Those identity thieves that are really committed to this, don't just live online, may actually go through your trash. So, there's rich information in there. If you think about all the things you put in the trash, maybe bank statements or personal letters, or even letters from medical institutions. All these may have account numbers on them. They may have your name, address, date of birth. There may be lots of information you can glean from these, or information where you can go off and find out further information because what you know on there already. So make sure that you're looking after your trash, and we come back to that about the proactive steps in just a moment. The two things that we're going to deal with today is the internet and data breaches. The internet is a rich source, unfortunately. We all share too much. There's lots of information laying around on there about each and every one of us. And of course, that information at times is subject to data breaches, unfortunately, where some cyber criminal gets in and steals a big chunk of data off a company and it gets sold on the dark web or misused against us. Now, what can an identity thief do? Well, unfortunately, too much. They can open new lines of credit and bank accounts, so open actually new accounts by using your identity. And if you think about that, when you go into a store next time, they turn around and try and get you to take on a store card. Pretty much all you need is your driver's license, a social security number, and you're off and running, because it can validate your address, and they look up your credit file based on social security number. So with those two pieces of information, actually an identity thief can significantly come and harm you. They can change addresses on existing accounts if they know the security questions and such like. Then they could actually get your address changed, so they can then start intercepting that mail and doing something with it. They could then order replacement cards. That could even be done physically in a branch, and I'll give you an example of that as we go through. They could take control of your cell phone, and we're going to talk about that one in more detail as well. But that is a really, really damaging piece of technology to lose control of. And when we get to that, I'll explain in more detail. And they may even be able to forge checks as well. So, yeah, a shout out to the more legacy view on this as well, because forging checks, while it's not very electronic and digital, of course, it's just the same. It can have the same effect of taking money out of your bank account. So what about the information we share? Well, I'm going to use actually an example rather than preach to you about what you should and shouldn't be sharing. I'm going to use an example. I have a friend who participated in one of these a presentation I gave about a year or so ago. My friend, who we call her Lucy, she actively looks after and protects her location and privacy. Now, I will say there was a point in time where she became proactive in doing so. So prior to that, yeah, there's bits of information on the internet about her, and in fact, let me share some of that with you now. Yeah, I could see things like they've been to a theme park, and I should point out my friend here lives in London. They'd also been to Manila, and I could see who she'd been to a certain bar with, which Indian restaurant in Birmingham she'd had dinner at. She'd taken a trip to Lancing College, a big prestigious college, down near Lancing and Shoreham on the south coast of the UK, and stopped at a very, very nice little pub called Old Timbers Inn close by for lunch, and took a family holiday in France. So these are pieces of information prior to her protecting her location and privacy. Just gives you a feel for if you're not protecting your location and privacy, these are the types of pieces of information that potentially somebody can come and gather about you. And I will say I was not tagged as a friend on any of the social media accounts. So this is information I managed to glean from the public domain. I did this as an experiment of being an outsider. I also found out where she was born, and that she was a Miss GB contest participant, and that she was America's Top Model contest in one of those early 2000 years. So lots of rich information. But what was more shocking to my friend when she actually sat through the presentation of what I could find, and I should point out, I asked her before I did this whether she'd be up for this, and she sat around and said, well, you're not going to find anything about me because I've locked everything down and I'm now a pretty private person. But here is what else I found. Well, I found a picture of her daughter, which was somewhat shocking to her. But more importantly, I found out what music she liked, what her favourite actor was, who her favourite writer was, what drink she prefers, tea, she's obviously a Brit here, and what her favourite car was. I will tell you, she doesn't have a Bentley. That's an aspiration that she would like to own a Bentley. What her favourite board game was, and that she'd like to be taller, which is kind of somewhat disconcerting because she's already 6 feet if she's got heels on. So if she was too much taller, I think I'd feel a little intimidated, because I'm 6'2", so people at the same height, great. People taller, but anyway, she's got no tattoos, and she's a Palace or Arsenal supporter. Let's hope she's an Arsenal supporter, because that's my team too. Now, where did this information reside? Well, when I ran this experiment, I looked through common dating apps, and I looked through common places where you could find other information out about people. So sign up for free accounts, then start searching through other profiles, etc. And sure enough, I had a hit on Lucy, and managed to glean all this information. So this was an online dating account that she had set up years beforehand. But of course, when setting up the account, she'd put in all her preferences, what she liked, etc. So that information was still out there. So there's the lesson to be learned here is, by the way, if you've got old accounts like that you don't use anymore, please go back, disable them. In fact, better still, delete them. So this information then doesn't reside out on the internet. And I think this was certainly a lesson for my friend. She, as I mentioned, lives in London. I could find out her daughter's name. I could find out pretty much who she worked for. So she's a scout for a modelling agency, that she speaks French. Now, the address In the UK, that's not so difficult sometimes, because if the person hasn't ticked the right boxes when they register to vote, then it's public information. I don't think everybody understands they should tick that box to keep the address anonymous, and I could find that same way her phone number. And once you have an address, you of course can look up from the regulator how much the property is valued at and when it was last sold. So lots of information. Now think about all the information that I've collected about my friend Lucy, and think about those questions that accounts ask me for security reasons. So where were you born? Where did you honeymoon? Or where did you... There's so many questions in here that I can start to answer because of the information and the snippets that she's left laying around on the internet. And this only spent maybe an hour or so looking for this information. An identity thief is going to have tools and scripts that will actually go off and collect this information for them and create a profile. So yeah, I was doing it as a manual task. So what type of phishing and scams that you might actually see somebody collecting identity through? So let's take a look at some of those. Well, phishing, firstly, phishing's not new. It dates back to the 1990s, around the AOL, email times, etc. And it's a cyber attack disguised as an email or a text message. And it's about the attacker impersonating a real company or somebody else for the purpose of collecting information. And it often is a combined attack. So you'll get an email, and the email will take you to a website where they're going to collect the information. So it's typically combined between the two, not just email. And the emails are often tracked. Now, I point this out because when you open an email, sometimes there's a slight pause and the signature will appear, or graphics, or a picture will appear. And that's being downloaded from the mail server. Now, if the mail has been constructed in a certain way, that information will be being pulled off the internet somewhere. And at the point where you pull it from a server, that server will grab your email address back because it knows who the requester is, and it will track who is actually pulling the image. And that's why companies do this and scammers do this, so they know that emails have been opened. But of course, you've then validated this is a real email address, so it's not just an email box that wasn't no longer used. You're validating it's active. So you're telling the cyber criminal that there's somebody on the other end of this email account. Now, what does a phishing email look like? Here's a good example. We often see these ones in our inboxes on a frequent basis. Certainly PayPal seems to be a big target here, or eBay, or certain other online services, unfortunately. And as you can see, your PayPal account has been blocked temporarily. Not uncommon to see an email of this type. And it's asking you from this email to take you off to a web page. As I state, that's usually a combined attack. But of course, if you hover over that PayPal reference at the top, you can see that the address that this has come from isn't from PayPal. So that's number one. You should actually look to see who the email is really from. Now, PayPal know my name, so they don't write me an email that says, "Dear email address." They actually say, "Dear Mr. Anscombe," or "Dear Tony," or whatever it is, and address me correctly. So there's an issue there. Now, this one's a little less obvious, but those of you that are grammar people, they're looking for grammar when you read text, you'll notice that the grammar is incorrect here. Very common mistake in phishing emails. They make grammar mistakes, or they make spelling mistakes. You would think they'd take the advice of their word processors, but for some reason they don't. And as you can see, this one's definitely incorrect. Even if you ignore the grammar, there's no spaces or anything like that. So this is clearly wrong. Then if you look at the web page it takes you to, there's other things in here that should point you to this as well. Now, it looks real because it says PayPal at the top, but it's not secure. Now, PayPal have digital certificates. This should be green. It should have a padlock because they will run HTTPS, which is the encryption between you and them when you actually send information across the internet. So look for look for that. Look for the green, or look for the padlock in there. And it's the wrong. If you notice very carefully here, it looks like PayPal at first glance, but it's Pay, P-A-I -US. So it's a domain near the PayPal name. They're actually trying to dupe you there slightly. So make sure you're actually reading it. And if in doubt, actually never open the email. Just go to the PayPal website. If they're after verification from you for something, it's going to ask you that when you log in. So just ignore these type of emails and these websites. Here's an example from an AT&T sign into Yahoo Mail. This is another phishing site here. You can see here the actual URL is nothing to do with AT&T. It's a spurious URL, so always look for that. And why would AT&T in Yahoo have a link to the Google privacy policy? So again, that's a scammer not actually reading what they're putting out. They've cut and paste something. So be cautious. Always read the small print, so to speak. And then there's spearfishing, and unfortunately this is becoming more common because the more information you can find out about an individual, then you can actually customize that phishing attack. You can make it very, very personal. Let me give you an example of that. So this is an email I received through LinkedIn email system, and it comes from somebody I know, Alexander, who's head of corporate partnerships for a very prestigious charity in the UK. We've undertaken some projects before, and I'm going to come back to that. So his job title is correct. That's the first thing. So it does actually look and feel like it's from Alexander. The time zone is correct because he's in the UK, I'm here. It's actually picking up the time I'm receiving the email as opposed to when he's sending it. So this is during his day. So the time zone on the email is correct. I have participated in previous projects. That's public knowledge because I think there were some press releases that went out with both our names on them. So somebody would know that. But what's actually wrong with this email? Firstly, hello. You'd say, hi, Tony. We're friends. So actually there would be some more personal interaction. So there's number one in here, that it's not personal enough. But look at this email. It actually looks pretty good and pretty real, doesn't it? And that's my point here, is you've got to pick up on the really small things sometimes to pick up what's a phishing email. There's no reference to the type of product that we're talking about or project that we're talking about in here. We know each other. We know that when we talk, it's in confidence. So he would disclose some of the information around a project, and he wouldn't use a link. He'd actually detail details of the project in the email, or we'd set up a call to have a discussion. So I know that's wrong too. Now, interestingly, and this is where the personal just isn't enough, it would be regards Alex. We know each other well enough. He's not Alexander, he's Alex. And whoever has scammed this, hasn't done their research on who he is and how he signs his emails. But you see how real this email is actually starting to look. Now, amusingly, I called Alex and told him that I think he'd had a hack in his LinkedIn account, and sure enough he had, and we laughed, and he went off and fixed it. Now, can you tell about whether something's real or not? This is another example. This is actually a bank. Now you can see which one do you think is real and which one do you think is fake, and I'll give you a moment to, in fact, let me keep talking and talk you through this. On the one on the left, you'll see there's a lovely advert there saying fraudsters call pretending to be the bank and other companies you trust. There's some protection information in there saying you need to stay safe online. And on the one on the right hand side, you can see it's offering you multiple ways actually of signing in. So by card number or by customer number. But you'll see these look fairly good. They look very, very similar. Now, for those astute amongst you that understand, if you do understand European law, you'll notice there's a cookie thing on the right-hand side one, which means the companies have to request to put cookies on your machine. There's little snippets of information that say, what language you prefer to look at the content in, etc. So that should be there. But we can see on the left-hand one, there's that message as well. Well, I can tell you now the one on the right is the real one. The one with the message warning about fraudsters is the fraud. But my point here is they look very, very real. So you've got to be switched on when you go to one of these websites. Don't forget about mobile. These things can happen on mobile too. In fact, there's less information typically displayed on mobile, so be really, really cautious when you're reading emails or going to websites on mobile. Don't think you're immune because you're not on a laptop. And of course, scammers will use SMS in much the same way they're using email. So you might get an SMS and wonder who it's from. Well, if it's not from somebody you know, or it's not from something you signed up for, just delete the SMS. Again, don't click on anything and just remove it. And sometimes you can see even within apps. So this is a Facebook verification. This is a Trojan within another app. It looks for whether you're a Facebook user. And when it sees you open Facebook, it then prompts you for this verification. So in effect, it takes over the screen. And why would Facebook be after your credit card details and such like to verify your identity? Who knows? So this is a scam. So just be aware that if something is out of context, then it's not real. Now, I mentioned taking control of your mobile phone here. This is a deadly one. SIM swapping. It's a fairly new thing. In the last, I would say, year, 18 months, it's become more prevalent. This is where a cyber criminal actually socially engineers the phone company to reissue the SIM card. Now, the SIM card is a little thing in your phone. It's a card that inserts in your phone, and it's got your phone number on it. So whoever's got, at the moment, the active SIM card is your phone number. So what they do is they socially engineer somebody in a phone carrier shop. Oh, I've lost my phone. Can you reissue the SIM? So they'll know your social security number, your address. They know pieces of information about you that we've already discussed. And they dupe the guy in the shop to turn around and say, I'm really in a stop. Somebody stole my wallet, so I don't have a driver's license. The story will go on. And they unfortunately may reissue the SIM card. Now, if they do reissue the SIM card, then somebody takes control of your phone. This is really deadly because your phone is used as the SMS authenticator for your bank accounts. You can reset. Typically, it's used to reset email passwords or passwords for accounts. Your phone is actually an authentication device these days. So if somebody can control your authentication device, there's a lot of damage they can actually do to you. So for example, with a SIM swap and certain pieces of information like social security number or who you bank with, somebody can walk into a branch and possibly get a reissue of your debit card or your ATM card. And the way they do that, they go to the desk, turn and say they've lost their wallet, they're traveling, can they reissue the ATM card? The bank will turn and send a verification code to the phone. The phone, of course, will receive it because the cyber criminal has got it now. He'll give the code to the person, the teller over the other side of the desk, and they'll reissue the card. And there we go. Your card got reissued and can now be used. And of course, with that, they'll probably reset the PIN and all sorts of other things. So be super cautious. Make sure that with your phone, a carrier, you've been in and you've set a password on your phone account. I can't stress that enough. So what happens to all this information? Well, the cyber criminals that steal it typically don't use it themselves. They sell it on the dark web. And let's take a quick look at that. So what is the dark web? Well, only 96% of the web, well, in fact, the other way around, only 4% of the web is the bit we see. 96% of it is kind of below the waterline. So think about that. There's the dark web at the bottom, which is a lot of illegal stuff. There are some legitimate reasons for the dark web as well, because if you're living in a country where you are not allowed to have a view or can't see the news, then the dark web may actually be your source there. But there's that big chunk in the middle, academic databases. Think about your bank account. When you sign into your bank account, that's all on the internet, but it's pages that are hidden behind your password. But that's the deep web. Yeah, so that's kind of where the dark web lives in relation to what the piece we see at the top, the Googles and the Yahoos that we use on a daily basis. Then, what happens on the dark web? That information, those emails or that data breach is sold. Yeah, so the cyber criminal that stole it will go on there and start selling that information. And as you can see here, 100,000 USA email addresses. No passwords, just emails. And they may be validated emails, i.e. they've opened an attachment or downloaded a graphics, they know they're active. So there's different levels of emails, and depending on how much you want to spend. But in this instance, 100,000 validated US email addresses is $9. So there's money in this for cyber criminals that are involved in data breaches, especially when these data breaches are for hundreds of millions of accounts. What happens beyond that? I used the PayPal example earlier on phishing, so sticking with that. This is a site, the PayPal sent on the dark web, and they sell PayPal accounts. Yeah, so kind of a little bit scary there. So let's look at some of those accounts. You can see accounts, how much there's in the accounts, the balance of the account, where the account is held, and the price that you're going to pay the cyber criminal who stole the details. So they're not actually committing the fraud themselves. They're selling the fraud onto somebody else to go and commit the real fraud against you. Of course, all of it's real fraud, but you know what I mean. It's the actual transaction against you. Now, interestingly enough, if they sell you something that doesn't work, yeah, you can contact them. There's a complete service section, and they'll actually replace the account with another account. Yeah, so honesty is somewhat amongst thieves on the dark web. Not just PayPal accounts, credit cards too. You can buy packages of credit card numbers and the security codes, the CVC number, and you can get those into your email box. And yeah, they're refreshed every few days. So this is very current data, because of course somebody may actually be blocking their card. So how do we protect our identity? Well, first thing is strong passwords and passphrases, two-factor authentication. Let's lump these two together. Yeah, don't use the same password on multiple sites, and think about the asset that you're protecting. If you're protecting your bank account, you need a super complex password. Now, the way I do this is I have phrases in my head. So, for example, I'm an Arsenal supporter, as already mentioned. Yeah, Arsenal Football Club, so AFC 2 ! Manchester City Football Club, so MCFC, lowercase, yeah, #0. So it may be a game I've attended, but it's something I'm easily going to remember, and it's just a set of random numbers and letters to anybody else. But of course, it means something to me, and there's no real words for somebody to brute force either. So it's very hard to guess. Two-factor authentication. I already talked about this with the SIM swap. If wherever possible, on every account you can possibly do this on, switch on two-factor authentication so that you're using your phone as a secondary authenticator. So it's not just relying on your user ID and password, it's then sending you something to another device and you're giving that data to it as well before you log in. That's the one big thing that can help you protect your identity online and having a scammer getting into your accounts. Don't carry social security numbers, don't store them in your phone, and don't have PIN numbers written down or stored in the same way. Shred everything personal. That stops that guy dumpster diving. However, I'd like to catch somebody in my bin dumpster diving. I think it would be hilarious. But make sure you shred everything. Everything that's got your name and address on it. Everything, even if it's a charity or mailer or whatever, just shred it. If it's got your name and address on it, it's better actually in PCs, not in the bin for somebody else to read. And when asked for your details by companies, always question why they need it. They're asking for details that you don't think is relevant to the service they're providing. Then ask them what they're going to do with the details and how it's going to be stored. Yeah, monitor your accounts, bank accounts, etc. Make sure you're not being scammed or targeted anyway. Enable mail tracking. So I don't know whether you use this service, but with USPS, every morning I get an email from them that shows the mail I'm going to expect to see in my mailbox that day. A really cool system, and it tells me what parcels might be delivered that day as well. Because I know what pieces of mail are going to be in the mailbox, if somebody actually takes one, I know that something's missing from my mailbox instantly. And I can identify most of the time what those letters are. You know what a bank letter or a statement looks like, or certain companies send things in certain envelopes in certain ways. So you can actually pretty much identify from the envelope what's in the envelope. So turn that on. That's actually a pretty good thing to turn on. Protect your phone number. As I already said, go into your carrier, set the extra security protocols around your phone number. If you've never set them, they're not set, and somebody could actually abuse that. So make sure you go and actively do this. Question phone callers. Unfortunately, there's lots of scammers who will ring you up as well. Don't stay on the phone with them. Most important. If you think they're a scammer, just hang up, be gone, and put on the robocalling thing as well, so you're not being bugged on your phone that way either. But get rid of those scammers. If Microsoft do not phone up people and tell them they need to update their machine, that's a scammer. The IRS don't call you and tell you you've got an issue with your social security number. That's a scammer. They will write to you. Make sure you have antivirus protection. Can't state this enough, because that's going to help you from a technology standpoint about protecting against phishing, protecting against bad links, and protecting against malware. And I'm going to mention that again in just a moment, just to drive the point home. Limit where you share data. Not everybody in the world needs to see what you had for dinner last night, or where you're going, or where you went today. So limit and share only with friends. Low credit limit on a card that you use online. Never use your debit card online, and don't transact over public Wi-Fi. All good tips in here, and again, antivirus protection is on this slide as well. But when I say don't transact over public Wi-Fi, it's actually got the right name. It's public Wi-Fi. Yeah, so don't do some things over public networks. Wait till you get home or use your mobile device if needed. Now, this is a big one. Freeze your credit account. Yeah, freeze your credit file. And I say this because if you freeze it, then nobody else can access it. So if somebody tries to get a credit card in your name, they can't, and it restricts access. And you can unfreeze and freeze. So if you're then in somewhere, you want to get a store card, or you want to get more credit, or you need to unlock your credit file, you can unlock it, let them access it, yeah, and then you can relock it. So it stops somebody opening accounts. And you can do this for kids, grandchildren as well. So you can actually create their credit file for them, and it stops anybody else doing this. Yeah, this is one of the biggest things I actually think you can do to stop financial fraud against you. However, please bear in mind, it doesn't affect existing accounts. It only stops them doing for new accounts. There is legislation coming. I talked about data breaches, so just quickly, we're all here in California. There is privacy legislation or actually enforced now. The CCPA Act protects our data. It states how companies need to protect our data encrypted. There needs to be authentication. And it states big fines. And it doesn't look like that way from the numbers on the screen, but if per incident, per victim, if that's 40,000 or 50,000 Californian residents are part of a data breach, that soon mounts up. That becomes a big number, and a company's going to have to pay. So there's a motivation for companies to protect our information in the right way. And you've got similar legislation in Europe under GDPR as well. And just to end, if something does happen to you, don't feel stupid. I was attacked as part of a British Airways data breach about a year and a half ago. Cyber criminals took my credit card data, and they took out $7,500 worth of insurance policies. They cashed them into another account, so they were laundering money through knowing my credit card data. There's nothing I could have done about this. I used the right card online, and it was unfortunately breached, and they took advantage of that. So just be aware. Make sure that you're doing everything you possibly can, but don't feel silly if something does happen. Don't feel embarrassed about it. It may not actually have been within your control. And if you are a victim, here's how to get help: identitytheft.gov. Report the crime to the FTC. The more crimes they get reported, the more focused this gets by legislators and by law enforcement. And more to the point, they'll help you with a recovery plan and help you through the process of regaining your identity, or what to do if one of your accounts has actually been abused. So thank you for attending this webinar. It's been great to talk to you about this. As I said, ESET's a cybersecurity company. We have an offer for you today where you can get discounted consumer software from us. So there's the address up there, offers.eset.com/oasis. And if you've got any questions, I'm free to take them now. I'm looking forward to having that conversation with you.